Terrible wet day here in northern Cyprus. Welcome back to the videos. It's actually been like this all day, raining. It's not what I ordered. I'm not here for this. I've got my shorts on, you know. And I've come to another disused Greek church in the northern part of Cyprus, and I want to talk to you about a little bit of theory of photography, because I want to talk about aspect ratios, the visualization process, the ratio selection, what it is that I prefer in architecture photography, and more in this week's video. Let's get inside in the dry and discuss it, shall we? Let's get in. Okay, so which ratio suits architecture photography best? To be honest with you, there isn't a best for any particular genre. There isn't a go-to ratio or crop for a particular genre of photography. And that is the same for architecture and interiors. So whenever I walk into a location for the first time, it's pretty much then that I'm determining which ratio, which image shape am I going to actually choose for that location. I do tend to edge towards 5x4, and on the flip side 4x5 portrait or landscape orientation, really because I'm using tilt shift lenses. Now for me, the ability, more importantly, to get the width in a portrait image, so for example here I'm using my 17mm, I can create panoramics, and that can give me the ability to do a 4x5 essentially as a portrait orientation. So in other words, I'm shooting with my cameras in landscape orientation, but I can shift the lens top, middle and bottom to select something a little bit different and stitch that together. However, because architecture photographers do tend to use these tilt shift lenses, you do see quite a lot of square images, 5x4 and so on in the genre. Mostly because when you've got that much real estate in your TIFF files, your RAWs, when you've combined them together, is very difficult and feels quite an emotional thing to crop away so much of the detail once you've kind of gone to process the image. But it could be that I visualize a square image. It could be that I visualize a 5x4 landscape orientation image, or maybe even a 4x3. Occasionally, of course, I can just use the lens as is to do a 3x2, what comes out of the camera, 17mm, 24mm, 50mm, whatever it is that I determine for that location. Whenever I'm shooting out in the field, I'm always mixing up my aspect ratios. 3x2, both in landscape and portrait orientation, and even maybe a 5x4, like you see on the screen here, is occasionally used. Recently in Budapest, I photographed this building where I ultimately ended up with 2 square crops too, 1x1 aspect ratios. Now, of course, when it comes to this, I only use this aspect ratio when the subject really demands it. It brings formality and symmetry to the image and is a format commonly used in fine art photography. Now, when it came to this Cyprus project, of course, as well, I also mixed up which aspect ratio I was using for which purpose. I used the 3x2 in a number of opening images, landscape orientation, and it suited some of those settings very, very well. but I also looked at 5x4 crops, or should I say 4x5s, as you can see here. And that really suits, of course, both the Instagram format, but also a certain style of space. I think they came out well. How am I going to do that on location? Well, for me, like I said, I've selected the 17mm tilt shift lens here. I've got my Canon R5 as usual on the front of that. Now, if I go to actually set up my shot, look at my scene, I can see for me, I've kind of predetermined where my tripod's position's going to be here. Now that instantly means I could have used my 24mm lens, but I like the idea here, for example, of the shape of the roof. I like up there, you've got the kind of where the speaker would have spoke from in the church. I like the idea of that. And of course, I like the idea that down on the right-hand side here, you've got these features as well, including the little step, rocks that have fallen, and so on. So 17mm fits all of that in. So that could just be a 17mm 3x2 ratio photo at this point. So I'm going to just take that. Now, I'm not talking about settings in this video at all, but it's my usual really. F8, ISO 100, 3 brackets, 2 stops apart, done. The thing is, when I then go to shift my lens, so I unlock it on the right hand side and shift it to the top, instantly I'm visualizing now the top of the image joining that central section. So as we shift it up there, I'm just going to refocus, make sure that my focus is in. It is, I'm going to shoot that. Now currently we could stop there actually. We could completely stop that, and actually what we could do is join those together in post and actually have kind of a square image. Now I'm going to do that for you so you can see what it looks like, and that's here now. However, if I now include the bottom section too, I'm going to scroll all the way down here with my lens, make sure I'm in focus again. Now I'm not going all the way to the bottom. I know that I don't need it, even with this ratio photo. When I then take that shot, 3 brackets again, I can now visualize top, middle and bottom. And I know that when I crop that, you know, the natural crop on it, put it into post, that a 5x4 is going to look probably one of the best options. But there could be others as well. Now, let's have a look at the 5x4, this finished result, and then we're going to look at 3x4, we're going to look at some other ratios as well, 3x2 and so on. So the image that I was shooting in the field was of course a 4x5, and actually it works really, really well here. Not too much flooring, lots of the ceiling detail, and nothing is too stretched or warped. Same thing goes really for the 3x2 landscape orientation aspect ratio. A little bit of the ceiling is cropped. That is not the case though in this one, which is of course the 5x4. Nice balance to it, and nice look and feel as well. The next two aren't really an option, which is the 3x4 and the 2x3. The 2x3 is definitely a no-no, way too much floor involved. Okay, so choosing an aspect ratio that suits the scene is one thing, and it depends for you really on what camera you've got as to which native aspect ratio comes with your camera. All of mine are 3x2 native, but yours could be different. If you're shooting, say, medium format, it's going to be one thing, maybe 6x4, or if you're shooting with some sort of, I don't know, crop sensor or some sort of entry-level bridge camera, then your aspect ratio may differ. Now, don't be deterred by that. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. In fact, for certain genres, I would say certain aspect ratios work really well. And some people even go out of their way to buy cameras because of the aspect ratio that it shoots. Think of those old film letterbox cameras you used to get, kind of like, was it like 12x3 or something? I can't remember, but there used to be lots of different cameras out there with different aspect ratios for that purpose. And it's a good thing. Of course, I'm a fine art photographer, and you might ask me, well, which ratios sell best for you, James? Well, to be honest with you, 3x2 is the answer, but not because of the ratio. It's because of they were older images, and that's what I had at the time. It's been a longer period of time, more of them have sold. It's as simple as that. But I've had images that are square, 1x1 ratio, that have sold very, very well. External images in Lebanon, for example, and I've had 5x4 portrait or 4x5 sell very well in portrait orientation over the years too. When it comes to displaying your work, I would say approach it, if you're going to be a fine art photographer or want to sell work in gallery spaces and actually produce a certain style that people recognize, my advice would be to choose an aspect ratio and kind of stick with it. Make that part of your artistic process, if you will. Certain photographers would even go out there and choose a certain camera, an old film camera, a certain look, because of the aspect ratio of it. It might be because your genre suits a certain aspect ratio. So have a think about that. Maybe put it into your artistic approach, that when you display images, it could be that you use a certain aspect ratio for the whole room and it would work really, really well. I've got an exhibition coming up hopefully later on in the year in Istanbul, and it's something that I'm thinking about constantly over the next couple of weeks, to kind of select images that are going to work exactly for what they need, which is 4x3. So I've got a lot of thinking to do in terms of what's going to fit those spaces. So as well, on the back of the LCD or in the menu system of the camera, you can actually go in and choose a crop, like basically choose a predetermined crop to kind of help you visualize what the architecture shot's going to look like. It's not foolproof, of course, because what it's doing is it's cropping the overlay, the JPEG on the back of the LCD, and it's just giving you an understanding maybe of what it's going to look like. It doesn't actually damage your RAW file at all. It doesn't come out in that manner. The RAW is the RAW off of the sensor. You do that by going into the menu, choosing a preset, and of course 5x4 is not on there for me. The other thing as well is I've just come accustomed over time to be able to use the tilt shift lens, and I know from experience what it's going to look like, what options I've got in terms of cropping. So this is how you do it, but I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. Here we are in camera, and I'm using the Canon RP here to show you the menu system. And I've still got my 17mm tilt shift attached to the front. However, it's not shifted, it's just a 17mm lens. So you could just be using, realistically, your wide angle lens of choice here to get a similar shot. If I press menu and I go into the system here, I'm just going to zoom in so you can see what I'm looking at. We've got a bunch of options. Number one on the menu, as long as on our mode dial on the top here, we're in photography mode, not video. Under image quality, you've got cropping, aspect ratio, and we're going to go in there on the menu. Now, there's a bunch of options here. There's full, there's 1.6 times crop, 1:1 aspect ratio, 4x3 and 16:9. To be honest with you, only 4 of these are probably more beneficial for photography, and I wouldn't recommend straight off the bat for architecture photography 1.6 crop, not unless there's a particular use case. But realistically, the 1.6 crop turns your full frame camera into a crop sensor camera, pushing in on your field of view like so. So if I go into that, you're going to see that the field of view is much narrower, and essentially that's great for birders, wildlife photographers. It helps you use, say, a 300mm lens and get much closer to the subject. Our next two, 1:1 and 4:3, these aspect ratios could definitely be used for interior photography, and we're going to be looking at them in a minute. 16:9, I would say, is more towards the video, of course, giving you the letterbox effect on video. So let's go into 1:1 aspect ratio and look at our crop. And it's going to put an overlay on your image like so. Now, as mentioned a minute ago, this isn't going to ruin your RAW file. This isn't going to change things. It's just giving you a preview of what things are going to look like when you're shooting. So if I went in here now, I can see, for instance, that straight away, we've kind of got everything we need apart from the speaker's podium. It doesn't really show very well on the left-hand side. It's kind of cropping some of it off just here. So where I'm positioned, it's not going to work really. It's going to crop off some of that. However, if I change the aspect ratio, go back in here and go to 4:3, when I selected that, we're going to get much closer to what I actually wanted and what I showed you previously. A 4:3 crop for this location works really, really well. I can actually just shuffle a little bit, maybe my camera's position. I can kind of just nail the kind of composition down a little bit more. And once I've locked it in, everything that I want in the scene is available to me. We've got the arch, we've got the altar, we've got all of the details in the shot, and that works very, very well. If I take this, of course, 4:3, I shoot this image, what it's going to do, that's just giving you the little overlay, the kind of grid overlay. In your RAW file, that is not lost, as mentioned. Okay, so I'm pretty much done. Which aspect ratio did you prefer in this location? Let me know down below. Also, maybe you have a special camera with a certain aspect ratio that you always shoot with. Or maybe in your genre, you prefer a certain aspect ratio too. Let me know as well down below and I'll come back to you as soon as I can. That's pretty much me for this week. However, over my website, I do now have a free gift for you. I've got free architectural shoot cards, and the idea is that you download them, put them on your mobile phone in a separate gallery, and you can scroll through them on location when you're photographing architecture, interiors, as a kind of reminder as to the steps to what to do to get good images. Things like settings, locking down the composition, perspective, this kind of stuff. So it's a free gift. Follow the link in the description below. It'll take you to my web page. Once you're there, just hover around on the page for a second. A little box will pop up. Stick in your email address, download the cards, put them on your mobile phone. They're free from me to you. Enjoy. Okay, so that's everything for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, take care, guys. I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye for now.